So beauty is the third concept in TASIS's motto, truth, goodness, and beauty, and paradoxically it is the most accessible and mysterious at the same time. One of my favorite definitions of beauty comes from the ancient Greeks. They viewed beauty as a calling us to truth, calling us to goodness, and to something beyond ourselves. I think we've all felt that the feeling of losing ourselves when we behold beauty. Mrs. Fleming's, the TASIS's founder, of course, agreed. She said young people need and deserve to be surrounded with beauty. It's like a security blanket that will always remain with them no matter what the rest of their life brings. So over the course of the past almost 3 decades, in 2026 we're going to hit 30 years, I believe, TASIS has been fortunate enough to have as its master architect David Mayernik, associate professor at the University of Notre Dame's School of Architecture. David, along with chairman of the board, Lynn Fleming-Eshelman, let's hear it for Lynn. Lynn keeps saying she believes in providence, and her meeting David was an act of providence, and the two of them, what alchemy for this beautiful campus. David, along with Lynn, has woven into TASIS's Global Village not only that security blanket of beauty we all enjoy, but also the very values of the school, which you'll hear about shortly. David has said of his career, I've invested decades in mastering the ideas and techniques that privilege the ideal, the beautiful, and the meaningful. Thanks to David, we are all privileged to be surrounded by the beautiful, which calls us to the ideal and meaningful in our own lives. We are not alone in this assessment. As you may be aware, TASIS has recently topped Architecture Digest magazine's list of the most beautiful boarding schools in the world. And we never tire of saying that, by the way, it never gets old. And though it takes a village, a global village, to achieve this recognition, we have David's unique vision and leadership to thank for getting us here. We are fortunate to have him here tonight to talk with parents about the next phases of the Global Village. And he actually has given 2 talks already today to high school students and the middle school students. And the middle school students wouldn't let him go, actually. They were so interested. They have some skin in the game, right? Because they're actually going to experience this beautiful development. So we're very lucky to have David here. So if you would please join me in welcoming TASIS's award-winning master architect, David Mayernik.
I have to always lower this after Chris. Thank you for coming. And it's really my pleasure to be part of TASIS. It's been, a big part of my life, obviously, for the second half of my life so far. And I want to share with you a little bit of the history, the background, because some of you might not know how we got here, what it was like once upon a time, and how much happened actually over a very short period of time, which is essentially a prelude to how much is happening now and will continue to happen over the rest of essentially this decade. And so first I'm going to start off with a little bit of background history and one, I think, amusing image of the way TASIS once was. But I want to also talk about the ideas and what has inspired us, Lynn and I, to make this campus, and to try to explain how we see it as an example for the world, not just a place that does something for us, but that actually contributes something to our immediate context and to the world at large. So probably most of you parents don't know about the bubble, but the bubble was the TASIS Gymnasium. This is soon after it was inflated in the 1960s with a periods car immediately in front. So it's a futuristic image of kind of a TASIS that might have been. But it only lasted about 30 years. And when I came along, the idea for the Palestra essentially was what sponsored our master plan of 1996. And the Palestra was really in response to the fact that the bubble was leaning and leaking and it was on its last legs. And so the challenge of our master plan then was that the campus was much smaller. Like, for example, where we are now and up the hillside from us here, so above us towards Shahank and up towards where Kajoya had been until recently, belonged to neighboring properties. The area around Aurora and all of that was not part of our campus. And so where the big Palestra would go was essentially the defining element of the master plan, and fitting it into the hillside the way we did really is what sponsored everything else. And my fear, though, was when we were building the Palestra that it was going to be nicknamed the New Bubble. I'm happy to say that never happened. So the Palestra was finished in 1999, so only 3 years after we did the first master plan. And this is what it looked like in 2005, looking essentially towards the hillside. You see the Palestra. Monticello had been built after the bubble was realized, after the bubble was inflated, maybe almost 20 years later. Monticello comes along, and then we built the Palestra and attached onto the other side of Monticello the library. But you can see above the hill it was green. It was essentially a mini forest, if you like. And essentially the Palestra was at the edge of the campus, or at least at the edge of this part of campus. Immediately to the right of the Palestra was the property line. In only 10 years, and this is what the campus looked like, and it's essentially what the campus is that we have today, the last bit of which was the science building. So everything essentially where we are now, in the Palmer Theater, in the arts building, the Shahang Arts building behind, the Fiammetta, Lanterna buildings, and science were all built within a relatively short period of time. And that was ambitious. It was one that were challenging to build on the hillside especially. Much had happened in the intervening years. Land had been acquired, the land where we are now and where the arts building was built. And so this is a view of what it used to look like on the left between Monticello and the Palestra. When you looked up the Scalinata to the top, all you saw were trees. And that building at the top of the hill, which became Fiammetta and Lanterna, was really, for me, the part I thought was the most ambitious of the whole master plan. Because it was on the hillside, because it was tall, because it was on the steepest part of the hillside. It was behind the gymnasium. The gymnasium was big, but relatively easy to build, built mostly on flat land. And so, I don't know if you may know that I also fantasize myself as a painter, and I paint frescoes. I've painted frescoes in a number of places at a church in Tuscany, thanks to Lynn as well, for the American Academy in Rome, where I'm a fellow. And a number of the buildings here on the TASIS campus have frescoes that I've executed. And I painted this one at the loggia at the top of the stairs at the back side of the Palestra, which represents the choice of Hercules. And the story of this scene in the myth of life of Hercules is that he makes his club that he's going to use to perform his 12 labors. And then he sits down to rest, and he's visited by two women who represent two choices in life, virtue and vice. And vice is not really a dissolute life, a life of, doing awful things. Vice, in this story, is really a life of ease, a life of leisure, a life in the shade with nothing to do but rest and enjoy oneself. The alternative to that, which is virtue, she presents to him the hard, rocky, uphill path to fame. Life is going to be a climb, it's going to be difficult, it's going to be a struggle, but when you get to the top, you're going to have fame. And so, of course, being a hero of mythology, he chooses the hard, difficult path of fame. And so I represented the figure of virtue as pointing uphill. So she's actually pointing to the buildings to be built up on the hillside, and she's actually holding a trowel, which is meant to indicate that she's advocating building. And it's to say that hard, challenging path for TASIS is building that hillside, building the hard bit that will actually be the most dramatic and rewarding part. And I thought it would take many, many more years than in fact it did. But in fact, it did in fact happen. And within 10 years effectively. And so that's the view we have looking up now towards Lanterna, and arguably maybe the best part about La Lanterna is the view looking back down. It was meant to function as a gateway from the upper part of campus or from the road behind. And what it really does is it frames TASIS's view of itself and of its relationship to the landscape of Ticino. So, walking anywhere along Via Poporino, you can get a view out to Lake Lugano and to the Alps. But with La Lanterna, you get a framed view. And that framed view is to say that's a privileged view, that's a special view that is only available here from TASIS, the point of view of TASIS. And so that framed view is to essentially capture that view not take ownership of it, but see it within the context of TASIS, see it in relationship to TASIS. And it makes it a special view, a unique view that's not like any other view along the hillside of the Camino d'Oro. And it's partly also to say that TASIS is the view, that TASIS is not only taking advantage of what it looks at, it actually is meant to be looked at itself. It wants to be appreciated itself. It wants to be seen as a contribution to the landscape. So that's the way things were and the way things are now, and this is the way things will be. At some level, when you look at this, it's a fairly realistic rendering of what the campus will look like. It seems like it already exists. The parts that are missing that do not yet exist are the sports field in front of the science building. Immediately, sort of from this point of view, in the distance behind the science building, but really behind the Shabank Arts Center, is the new music classroom building and the McDermott dormitory and classrooms. A little off to the right, so behind science and between science and Belvedere, is the Le Pergolese new building, and Belvedere itself is going to have its roof raised and be completely renovated inside, and all of that will become the center of the elementary school. Then to the right side of science is the science greenhouse, so it's a kind of a research greenhouse for the science, especially ecology students, and a research garden immediately adjacent to it. This is from the point of view of essentially the new entry arrival point, so the new drop-off area, which will be dedicated really to the transition at the morning and the end of the day, because all of the parking is going to be sent underground. The parking is going to be sent underneath essentially that part of that sports field and the basketball court you see. And there'll be a brand new gateway to campus. There'll be a kind of a real front door that the campus currently doesn't have. But I want to make that argument that it's great to look out over this spectacular landscape. But I think TASIS has also taken on the burden and the pleasure of adding something to that landscape and being something that's worth looking at itself. That we are a kind of an example of how this landscape might in fact be developed. And one of the things that's made us what we are, this project, is this idea of a global village. And it's not a euphemism or an insignificant metaphor. We really have created a village in the sense that we've packed the buildings very close together so that you get public stairways and streets and piazzas like one would find in a small nucleo here around Ticino or in Italy. And that sense that it's a village is, I think, part of its formation role for the students. It actually introduces the students to life in a communal environment where they have to share space and essentially be part of a physical community as much as a social community. And so it's meant to be, in that sense, didactic. It's actually an experience that is formative, or should be formative for them. But the idea of building a dense, compact village, because we're really maxing out the amount of building we can actually build, is that it allows us to preserve open green space elsewhere. And so one of the ways we're able to do this and build all the new building essentially on this side of campus is because we're actually going to be demolishing buildings on the Hadsel side. Not Hadsel itself, obviously, but the Rezzonico and Valsecchi buildings will be demolished and returned back to green space. So it's a trade-off, but I think it's a model of a kind of urban development that is sustainable. It's sustainable in the sense that it's something that you could imagine everybody doing, and it would be to the benefit of everyone. That essentially there's a compensation that is that idea that not only do you get this kind of highly charged, intimate, urban kind of village-like environment, but you also preserve the maximum amount of contiguous open green space as possible. So this is what it's going to look like from within the new entry gate. So that's the arrival point. Everyone will pass through there for security reasons, and it really will be the front door to campus, which, essentially we have a kind of a gate, but it's practical in that sense. But this is really a kind of a threshold, a doorway, a front door to the whole campus. And I think it'll give the campus a greater sense of identity and integrity and kind of wholeness, and a sense of security and kind of a world apart, a protected environment. From there, your view is going to be towards, having left immediately behind that entry gate, your view is towards the new sports field and the greenhouse. And so your first experience of the campus is actually what we had always called in the campus master plan, the lawn. And the idea really comes originally from Thomas Jefferson's campus of the University of Virginia. You know, Monticello is named after Thomas Jefferson's house that looked out over, he watched the construction of UVA from Monticello. And UVA has this famous lawn that is really the heart and soul of the campus. And so we always saw this as more than just a sports field, but as a potentially, eventually, a kind of a gathering space. It might be that graduation could happen there and, on a beautiful day in the spring. So it's going to be the first impression of campus. It's another kind of shared public space, and it's essentially the threshold to the village itself. Beyond you can see the greenhouse there. Beyond the greenhouse in the distance, a kind of up above it is the Aurora building. Off to the right is a large new project, which is one of the most significant and really the last phases of the master plan, is a new dining hall. And we've been nudged to do this, shall we say, by the Comune, who would really love us to get all of our deliveries out of Certinago. But it also gives us the opportunity to create a much more effective dining experience, much more efficient service, everyone in the same room. And so it's a grand, elegant, large dining space with very efficient, effective dining service, and obviously a state-of-the-art kitchen. But one of the things it also offers is a rooftop dining terrace that will give us back some of the views that we would have had and have now at Denobili, looking out over the mountains and towards the lake. And so we'll get that view, but we'll also get the view back to the campus. And it's to say that from the dining hall, one can take stock of the whole campus, see essentially the whole campus laid out before the students and faculty and visitors. And it's the sense that that campus is itself the view, that I think it's fine to take advantage of a view, and everybody loves a view. But I think it's also something noble to be the view, to actually add something to that view so that you've left the world a better place than you found it. And that's our ideal, that's what we've striven to do. It's harder. The way we're building is harder. Building on hillsides is harder than building on flat land. If you've seen the excavation for what we're doing now for the McDermott building, which I'll show you in just a bit, that is not the easiest way to make a four-story building. And so we're doing it the hard way, like Hercules. We're doing it the hard way, but we believe it's the better way. And one of the things you also get out of it is that spectacular experience of seeing out to the landscape from different levels within the village. And just the last thing I'll show you before I show you what's coming out of the ground now. This is the pool that will be built over on the Hassel side of campus. So in the area where the Valsecchi building is today, this is the brand new pool, and it's immersed essentially in green in a kind of garden environment. So that's the one thing we're actually doing new on the other side of campus. Otherwise, all the academic functions of the school are going to be on the main side of campus. And so I hope you've seen this video that we have on the school's website of the development of the master plan. And I've edited it down just to kind of the essential stuff. And I'm going to talk over it and just hopefully explain it a bit while it's unfolding. But I want you to get a sense of what it's going to be like very soon to walk through what's being built now, because a year and a half from now, in August of 2026, the McDermott Center will be complete, the McDermott dorm and classrooms will be complete. And the experience that you'll see in this video will be available to everybody. So it's not that far off. And so there's a little bit of suffering that happens in the course of construction. Construction's messy, it's noisy, it changes the life of the campus while it happens. The benefits come at the end, obviously, and they tend to make you forget all that effort. And it's very easy to forget how we got here, but this view actually shows. And I think within a couple of years, everyone's going to forget what the McDermott construction site looked like. So here we're going to see the video. Again, you've probably seen this, but we're starting off with how the campus looks now, and then how it will look. And at some level, I would like to believe it doesn't look, that view of what it will look like looks as if it almost already exists. Because I think what we've been good at is having our buildings harmonize with each other. Not that they're all the same, but they're all sort of speaking the same language. They all participate in the same urban design idea, and they all shape positive open space. And so they're good at playing together. They're essentially good, they're buildings that know how to work with each other. And so every piece we add only augments that. It doesn't actually fundamentally change it. This is approaching the McDermott dormitory building, walking in front of it. So just if you extended the path in front of Lanterna, this is looking down Science on the right, Le Pergolais Elementary School on the left. That's the new arrival court, essentially the drop-off area. That's the gateway that you saw earlier from the inside. This is looking up to the McDermott Center, so between Science and the Shahank Arts Center. And that's the music building, which is perched kind of in between the arts building and McDermott. But I think the thing to keep in mind about the music building is that it has a really critical role to play. Underground parking, like I said, underneath the compo, so we're getting rid of virtually all the above ground parking. We're going to park about 90 cars below ground, so there will be some above ground spaces for visitors, but relatively discreet and hidden within, in some cases under solar panels in that new entry arrival spot, but otherwise the cars are essentially going to disappear underground. And the benefit of that is going to be the sports field on top. This is in front of the music building, so of course it has a piazza, it'll have a fountain. That's a view of it again from closer to Fiammetta. And so it has a critical role to play because it really contributes to that urban sense that it mediates between the arts building below and McDermott above. And from the top of the dining hall, again, looking out over the terrace back to the campus and to the landscape in the distance. And that idea that, again, we are adding something to the world we live in. We're not simply taking advantage of it. We're not simply looking out over it. We're improving it, augmenting it. And actually, I would like to believe, functioning as a kind of object lesson in the way things could be done. That we're actually, in a sense, albeit silently, advocating for the way development could happen that would be more sustainable and more beautiful, not in terms of style necessarily, but in terms of the idea of preserving open space as it disappears faster and faster. And we do have a sense for sustainability generally. All of our buildings have been built to be not only durable, but ecologically sound, built of durable and natural materials. But we're also now installing a lot of new solar panels, and the entire roof of the gymnasium will be covered with solar panels. So the campus itself is a kind of trying to be a kind of a role model for sustainability, for its own energy production and the quality and durability of the buildings that make it up. So that's what I have to say for you this evening. I would be happy to take questions.